Hello, everybody, and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today, we say hello to Lorna Mitchell of Aiven. Hey, Lorna, how are you doing?
Hey, Eric. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing well as well. Thanks for joining. I asked you to be on the channel because you were talking about AsyncAPI and Spectral, and I found that very interesting. So you're working for Aiven, and you're doing a lot of hosted data services that I'm guessing also have a lot of events to it. And you were just kind of casually mentioning this tool combination, and I found it really interesting. And so first of all, like, how did you get into using those tools together? Like, where's your background there, basically, thinking about that?
So I have a really strong background in APIs. I'm an OpenAPI standard contributor. I've been in that space for a long time, but now I'm working more with, like you say, data streaming and events. One of Aiven's main products is we do hosted Kafka. So then using Async API is a really good fit for that. And I already know Spectral because I've come from traditional HTTP APIs. So being able to bring that tool over with me and keep the benefits of, making sure that everything is as we hope it would be, I just find it compelling. These are two technologies that are in their early days in lots of ways, but we're going to see more from them for sure.
Yes, that's what I think as well. And I really like the story that you've now told, right? That saying, like, I have a tool that I know and that I like from the use that I had, and now I can take that tool, use it in a new context, but I can still use the same tool. And I think that is a really good story. And there are some reasons behind that that make that relatively easy. So let's first talk about Async API just a little bit. So what is different for Async API when you compare it, let's say, to the more mainstream OpenAPI specification?
I think Async API and OpenAPI do very similar things for different use cases. So most people know OpenAPI or its ancestor, the Swagger standard. It's a way of describing your APIs, what the data looks like, what the URLs are. Async API is the same thing, right? It's YAML or JSON. It's a description format. And it says, here is how the payload will look. These are the topics or the channels that we'll be sending it to. Here is how you authenticate. So it describes the data that we'll be streaming on your data streaming platform. And you see Async API used with MQTT, with Kafka, as I mentioned. I've used it with RabbitMQ, with WebSockets. So any of those, not just request response, but either point-to-point or brokered message protocols, it's a beautiful fit.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and as you're pointing out, it's a good fit and a popular choice nowadays for any of these event-driven scenarios, so to speak. And that's a space that, as you said, it's still growing. Maybe we're not even in the early days anymore, but we're still, I would say, in the growth phase. And as you mentioned, Async API is something that's picking up, and also Spectral, I think, is also still something that is picking up. We talked about this on the channel here already. We had a little intro. We had a little bit longer hands-on that showed how Spectral also is a tool that I think nicely is very easy to get started with it, and then you can get more sophisticated over time. And let's briefly talk about Spectral and how you got into Spectral, let's say, for OpenAPI, I would guess, at first, and then why it was relatively easy to transition over from OpenAPI to Async API.
I made quite extensive use of Spectral in the past, working with different OpenAPI descriptions, and that's to ensure things like not just validity, because Spectral's a bit more than that. It's quite opinionated, but also quality. I forgive it for being opinionated because it does make it very easy to turn each rule on and off. So, we can agree to disagree on the standards.
I like the way how you're saying, it's opinionated, but if you can overrule it, right? You can just say, shut up. I don't like your opinion.
Yeah, I'm not interested in how you feel about that. But we could also write our own rules and add extra constraints or things that we particularly wanted to do. We had a particular version naming convention, and we could make sure that we had that every time by adding the rule to Spectral. It was definitely a light bulb moment when I suddenly realized, oh, Spectral can also read my async API descriptions. It just auto detects that it's async API and does more or less the same stuff, which I think is, I haven't done as much with it in async API, but already I feel confident because I know the tool.
Yeah. And when I first looked into Spectral, at first I was actually a little surprised to see that technically speaking, it's not an OpenAPI validator. Technically speaking, it's a JSON validator. You can point it at any JSON, and if you have the right rules, you can have any JSON going through it. But I guess because OpenAPI and AsyncAPI do have quite a shared set of concepts to it, it's much easier to reuse a good set of the rules that AsyncAPI also has from the OpenAPI days. Now let's have so you have created like a short example for us to look at, and I think it's interesting to do that. So I'll just switch over here. Okay, now it works. Always takes me a little bit to get it working. So let's just have a brief look at what you prepared there, what it is. I think you have a short async API example, right?
Yeah, let me show you this.
Okay.
Really simple little document. And this is from a demo that I do in one of my talks. And the idea is it's a factory and it's full of sensors. So what you're looking at here is the door. All the doors have got sensors on, and this is the async API description for publishing that data. So we've got the standard info block, the different servers that it might talk to, the channel that we'll use. So we'll be publishing to door sensor, which is a Kafka topic, and then AsyncAPI keeps the components approach that OpenAPI has, so we can reuse this data in other documents if we want to. So it just says, hey, there's a location and there's a state. So it's super, super simple. But even the small documents, I feel we all make mistakes. So having something like Spectral, especially if you automate it and it's in your continuous integration process, means that you can ensure quality even as these files grow. And if you've worked with OpenAPI or AsyncAPI, you know they grow to thousands of lines really easily. Then you can check them. So I use Spectral, and I'm just linting it. I don't need to do anything in particular. I just send it. It's that file that you just saw. It detects that it's async API 2. whatever, and it picks up some errors. Now have a look at my errors and see if you can help me. It says that in the info document, I am missing my contact object, but it's also detected that the contract object is not expected here. Like, what could possibly have happened?
That is a very good question. It's a mystery to me what might have happened. But it's kind of funny, right? How sometimes it might actually take quite a while to spot such a typo if you're just kind of parsing for words and it kind of makes sense to you, right? And if you have a tool such as a validator there, it becomes so apparent that there's probably a connection between those two errors there.
I think possibly. Yes.
Possibly. And what's also nice here, and that again should encourage everybody to maybe just try it out, is that you didn't even have to write any rules for this kind of example, right?
No, I didn't do anything special. This is just straight Spectral as it comes. It says, oh, this looks like an async API document, and it uses its general set of async API rules. And I find this works well across pretty much all of the formats that Spectral supports. We talked a little bit about in OpenAPI, sometimes I turn rules off, but you can still do that. You can create your own rules if you're doing this all the time. But for straightforward, is this valid and coherent? Just does it. It just comes, just install it. It'll do it. I like it.
And it's not just valid, right? It's also, it looks a little bit more at additional, like you said, it's opinionated, right? It doesn't just check is it valid technically, but it also checks is it good async API according to some definition of good that you may or may not share. Well, but then you can always go the next step, right? Like with Spectral for OpenAPI. So if you start maybe disliking some of the rules or missing some rules that you would like to enforce, then with a little bit more effort, you can start adding your rule sets and mix in more of your own opinions of what you want to see. But as a starting point, I think it's always nice, I think, when tooling is built in a way that you can just whip it out and it already does something for you. And for now, that's already useful. And then you can start investing more time and effort later if you want to make it even more useful.
Right. And I see teams adopting this, perhaps turning some rules off immediately if they haven't got everything, and then starting to reinstate them and improve, and then eventually adding their own rules to suit their needs. Because, Async API is an open standard. It's closely related to the JSON standards and OpenAPI. It gives us there's lots of tooling and sort of prior art in that space. And so we can build on top of each other's work to achieve some of these things without having to reinvent custom parsers and all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. And you can also, I think, the other thing that I think Chris Wood pointed out when he was talking about Spectral, that you can become kind of stricter over time in your API lifecycle. So you could say, for like the initial project basically that people are working on, you just have a very loose set of rules. And then if let's say you want to publish it into a catalog or publish it to external consumers, then you apply rules that are a little bit more constraining so that you have kind of more polished API descriptions.
Yes, and I think that's a journey that almost all APIs go on. One thing I always advocate is putting the tooling, even if most of the rules are turned off, putting the tooling into your continuous integration, into your build immediately. So it's always there. And then you can sort of iterate, but you've got that expectation that the tooling is there. I do the same thing with documentation sites. I've got lint checking on pros. And the same thing, it's not especially strict at the moment, but it is there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice kind of closing thought, right? It's like having the tooling is valuable and you don't need to invest much to really tweak it in the beginning. So just having it there, like you say, having it as part of your integration pipeline, that's very useful. And then over time, when you realize that, hey, I really want to make sure our APIs are a little bit better than they are now, you can just start adding those rule sets. But I think as a starting point, that's a very good strategy. And that's exactly why I asked you, and thanks again for joining, right? Because I thought it's such a nice thought to say, okay, even if we just get started with Async API or, it's something we check out, let's just throw in that tool. And then when we become more sophisticated on that journey, we can always invest more time into the rule set. So on your personal journey, so to speak, where are you? Have you already started working on additional rule sets? Do you have your own rule sets, or is that something where you're still happy with the opinions that Spectral has?
I haven't done any for Async API yet. So this is something that when I was working very much more in a sort of API development space, I was building rule sets. Now I'm more working on just getting people started with Async API. And, I think Spectral, even just as it comes, it's got you. You make a mistake because you're still learning, and it will show you. And the error messages are pretty good these days, and I've been using Spectral a while. This has got a lot better over time, so credit to that team.
Yes.
Just good error messages, keeping you on the straight and narrow. I definitely have on my radar to do more with Async API. A lot of our customers are very well integrated with Kafka, and they expect those integrations to work out of the box. So having the API description, having it integrate with the existing description formats, that is all just magic. And with the open source, open standards in that space, we're all building on each other's work and sharing what we do. I think we'll see a lot more in this, and I'm excited to be here already working on it.
Yeah, I can't wait to, have you on in, I don't know, 6 months from now and talk more about your experience. Just because I'm curious and I really don't know, would you expect that there could be specific rule sets depending on the message broker that you're using? Like, like Kafka or RabbitMQ, or does it make any sense that you would have specific rule sets, or is that something that maybe in Spectral really wouldn't matter that much?
I think it would make sense, definitely,
Yeah.
because there are some things, the different brokers have different properties, different fields. So, and at the moment, we are mostly validating in a fairly general way. But, if you're running a big estate with lots of MQTT or lots of Kafka, you probably do need to add fields or properties there, and you need to make sure that they're right. So I do see this as something that people start increasingly to add, yeah.
Cool. So that's maybe something where we will see quite a bit of development then going forward, where people start adding these rule sets to AsyncAPI Spectral, which is probably still a little bit in its infancy. Lorna, thank you so much for joining. This was really interesting to me, and I hope everybody got something out of it. And I hope if you are looking into AsyncAPI, you are considering at least looking into Spectral. It should be a useful tool for you to check out and maybe use. Any closing words from you, Lorna, to our AsyncAPI Spectral audience?
No, I just want to echo that. I know that people may have looked at AsyncAPI in the past and it has been early days, but there's a lot happening. Have another look, try out the tools that are around and get involved, because that's the way that we grow.
Okay, great. Thanks again, and thanks everybody for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. And with that, we're done for today. Bye, Lorna.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.